Well, first of all, I'm thankful to the organizer for making me a part of this discourse. And I was thinking that I will be the maybe the last speaker, so I'll be having some occasion to really listen what others are saying, so that I can build upon something on that. Anyhow, it has come that I have to really open this discourse. As you see, that the title of this seminar talks about three basic things: food, water, and air. My short presentation, which I'm told to have 15 to 20 minutes, will be concentrating on food. More on right to food. Of course, when we are talking about food, it implies unadulterated food. Again, right to food may have many dimensions, many perspectives, but mine is focused on one. If you can really run that slides which I have brought. Is somebody running those the slides? Well, they are preparing for that. The title which I have given to my presentation is, of course, Right to Food in India, Rising Population and Shrinking Pie. Just now we had a short presentation on why do the people like us pay the tax, what we expect the government to do, and what at the end we are getting. And as far as tax fab is concerned, they are relating those unsatisfactory results of the government to one of the major causes, that is the population. So somewhere or the other, my presentation also relates to that one of the unmanageable problem for the government of India. So this is here, right to food in India, growing population and shrinking pie. I'll tell you what does the word pie here means. Uh, we have all heard that one very famous local saying, Khali pet na hoy gopala. Yes, that if the stomach is empty, it's difficult even to take the name of God. And Mahatma Gandhi has also said on this that if the God has to appear before a person who is really suffering from the pangs of the hunger, the best way, because God has many of us, the best way for the God to appear before that person is in the form of the bread. Now, from this common man language, let us proceed a little bit technically in terms of legal language. In terms of legal language, we can say that as far as international regime is concerned, we can locate the right to food in the larger right which is there for the well-being or for raising the standards of living. And I'm talking about UDHR, which is the Constitution of the world. It is before you, the particular article 25, in the language of which we can really relate this right to food. Then, as we know, this UDHR is further, the concepts have been divided and then elaborated into certain covenants. So, one of the covenants specifically emphasizes these things in the form of the adequate food and then, of course, freedom from hunger. Recently, Global Hunger Index of 2017. Okay, before I proceed to that, when I am talking about UDHR and then the two covenants, the distinguished, the audience sitting here are already aware of that those five kind of the rights which we are talking about, civil, political, economic, social and cultural, they are indivisible and interdependent to each other. But out of those various rights, this right which we are talking about, right to food, is such that which, even though I don't believe in a hierarchy of rights, but even though we have to talk first among equals, I really fail to understand which other right will come first than the right to food. Because it is this right which affects all other kinds of rights, any kind of right, civil, political, or any other kind of the right. So the thing is that the right to food really cuts across all other kinds of the rights. So it is so important that we have gathered here to discuss it a little bit elaborately. Yes, this is one of the latest index of Global Hunger Index, and this is of 120 developing countries. India's rank is 100th herein. I have the indicators with me on the basis of which this index is prepared. Primarily, there are 3 indicators, but not going in details of that. The one thing which we have to see, the perspective with which we have to see this index is higher the index, worse is hunger situation in that particular country. So if we are 100th, that means that shows how poor we are in this particular index. And this particular thing is, of course, we are leaving behind here in our neighboring country, Bangladesh, Iraq, or even the North Korea. These countries are better than us when we are talking about under this index. Now, from international arena, coming to our own India legal system, constitution, and other things. India is member of United Nations. It is also a state party to this International Covenants on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And as far as our constitution is concerned, even though no express mention of it has been made, but there are certain provisions. Our magical article in Constitution of India, Article 21, is there, right to life. And apart from that, there is another article, Article 47, again, the provision just now which I refer to in UDHR, we find herein also, which places a duty on the state to raise the level of nutrition of its people, among other things. So in the Constitution, we can locate these 2 provisions, one fundamental rights and another is directive principle of state policy, which we can really discuss later on when I'm coming to some case law and other things. Now, I cannot proceed further than mentioning first this case, which is known as PUCL, People's Union for Democratic Rights versus Government of India. Colin Gonsalves is here. Maybe that he will be telling you in detail some of the aspects of this case, who has fought in the Supreme Court for this. This is a case I'm sure all of you are aware of. There was a time during these 17 years before, where on the one side we were hearing the reports of deaths due to starvation, due to hunger, and on the other hand, in the government granaries, the grain, wheat, the produce was lying spoiled, rotten, overflowing. The godowns were overflowing. And then in that particular context, this public interest litigation was filed in the Supreme Court. And for a long period of years, at least 8 years, again, Colin can update us. Why? Because I had seen HR Ireland website only to update myself on this particular case, and I could found the orders from 2001 to 2009. For this long period of time, the Supreme Court has monitored the implementation of various schemes of the Government of India, of the state government, welfare schemes whereby they have provided these subsidized foods and other kind of schemes to the people, the implementation of that. So many factors were found by the court therein. One major factor happened to be the corruption, and very many things can be talked about this case, but since my discussion is not on this case, this is just one of the parts of that, and therefore I'll be just telling you 2-3 main things which I believe in this context are necessary for my presentation. This is a case in which the Supreme Court has made it very clear that whatever these welfare measures relating to food, nutrition, etc. are there, they are not merely welfare measures, charity. They are not charity. They come under legal rights or entitlements. If you remember the very first slide in which I quoted Mahatma Gandhi, reference to the God, from God we say, Hey Bhagwan, hum pe daya karna. We always seek blessings in the form of daya. But when in this system, particularly in a democratic system, when we are asking from the government, that is not in the form of daya or charity, that is in the forms of right. And we, the legal people, know what does the word right mean. Right are correlative of duties, and if those duties are violated, then there is a mechanism also for the enforcement of this and that. So herein the court has clarified that those schemes confer upon those persons who are entitled to it right to that. And again, we are aware of that midday meal, cooked midday meal in the schools, which was again a direction from the Supreme Court given to the state governments. And then since this anomaly that the food is overflowing on the godowns, government godowns, and then there are people of the same country who are really dying out of starvation, we can very clearly, any person can very clearly link it with the corruption, not only bona fide reasons for the non-distribution or what we can say non-identification of the persons to be entitled. And therefore this case is also illustrative, where the court had talked about, emphasized upon the transparency, accountability in the distribution system. Now from there I take you quickly to some of the schemes which have been initiated by the Government of India, but because the title of this seminar is whether the government has been able to ensure these kind of three basic necessities, and therefore more emphasis is on the government. Since 2013, this act has come, and therefore the schemes, you know all that, schemes are in the form of government guidelines. And when we are talking about law is more strong in giving the rights rather than what we are talking about welfare schemes. So in 2013, September 2013, the government has passed this National Food Security Act 2013. And as far as this act is concerned, again, it's a very lengthy act having 13 chapters, 45 sections, 4 schedules. But again, I'll be just dealing with 4 or 5 important points which I feel are necessary in the context in which I have been talking about. Herein, the Act has provided up to 75% of rural population and 50% of urban population, which is covered for the entitlement of the food hereunder, 5 kg per person per month, that this population will be getting food grains 5 kg per person per month. But before that, before the enactment of this act, there happens to be one scheme, welfare scheme by the name of Antodaya Ann Yojana. And under this Antodaya Ann Yojana, per household 35 kg entitlement had already been provided, and therefore under this act this has been provided because Antodaya are those class of people who are poorest among the poor, that even though here it is a limit of 5 kg per person, but if 35 kg per household one person is entitled, and as per this 5 kg he is getting less, then he will be getting the larger, that is under the old scheme. Now, before I take you further to a few of the things, we all know that because this is the organizers are the forums of the taxpayers, we pay tax, substantial amount of tax. I don't know those people who really earn very much, how do they feel when so much amount of money is deducted in their tax. But whatever my little salary is there, of course it pinches us when 1/3 almost of the salary goes into the tax. And of course we look forward to the government that that particular tax is spent on those kind of the purposes. You know, as far as this act is concerned, that 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population, this covers almost 2/3 of the population. So That is also one of the things which we should consider. So it is 1/3 of the population of this country which is feeding the 2/3 population, other population. Then primarily this is an act which gives subsidized food grains to the entitled persons, and the rates are here. It's 3 kg per kg rice they are getting through those public distribution system outlets, 2 kg per kg the pulses, and then 1 kg is the coarse grains. So that is the rate. It's a subsidized. It's almost free. The nominal this amount which has been kept therein. There is special provision for sport to the women and children. Yes, our government is now gender sensitized, women sensitized, and therefore there's a provision that the pregnant women and the lactating mothers, as well as children in the age group of 6 months to 14 years, will be entitled to meals as per their previously announced scheme, that is ICDS, Integrated Child Development Schemes, and other schemes. Then very interesting provision herein for which we really praise the government, and that is who is the head in the name of which the ration card and other things will be received. That is not the man, that is a woman, eldest woman of the household, of course, adult, above the age of 18 years will be the head of the household to receive whatever these entitlements are here. So just one thing more about this act, that is allowance, food security allowance. If this food grains are not paid by the state for one reason or the other, then of course there's a provision that the state will be giving the allowance money for that purpose. Now I am coming to the real, I will say, the real point of my discussion. The next, please. Wherein I am trying to establish certain linkages between growing population and the food security. Why and how the population matters in the food security or in elevating. Huh? Okay, fine. Which one? Which one? This one? Okay. That will be fine. Yes. You see, there is nothing to have a very deep analysis to know how the growing population affect the natural resources. And one of the natural resources which we are talking about, which I'm talking about here in my short presentation, is the food. Definitely, any kind of a planning, any kind of the thing also depends upon for how many, not only how, but for how many. I read the first 5-year plan, and wherein I found the words of our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, when he has said that when we plan, we have to keep in our mind not only how to plan, but for how many to plan therein. So, more population means the more pressure on natural resources, and here we are, of course, talking about this food. You know, I don't think any special empirical study is needed for this to say that most of the countries with the highest number of people facing food insecurity also have high fertility rate as well as population growth. Pressures on limited land resources, again driven in part by the population growth, means expansion of cropland. In the first place, we will come to technology and other advancement later on. So first of all is that we need the food, the agriculture, the cultivation to feed so many. We need to have more land for that purpose. But then the same population also need the same piece of land for shelter, for their houses, etc. And therefore, the other kind of the things come, that is vital forest resources or over exploitation, what we can say, of arable land. Now, increasing number of people very often drive up demand for food, which typically result in additional use of land, that land which is arable land and water. This causes more pressure in the absence of what we can say advanced technological developments. So if we are talking about developing countries, why? Because the first point here in the slide says that this is a problem more in the developing countries. Say for example in sub-Saharan countries. So those are the countries which are already lacking in the technology development. So how can we really think of that by having better technology on the less land, they can grow more crop, so no matter how or to what extent their population is growing. So overall demand for the food is affected by population growth, definitely. Nobody can, I think, deny this fact. Whereas the economic development and the rising incomes, they tend to shift the diets towards meat and other animal products. Now, coming to Indian scenario. Next. Yes. Maybe many of you are aware of a little bit these figures, population figures. This is wrong. What I have written 1.28 billion, because this was I have written another piece of work therein. I closed my that laptop at 2:30, and at that particular time, the population of India, we are having population clock. You can see it at the click of your mouse. So at that particular time, the population of India was 1.35 billion. Any idea how many people are added every day in India? Roughly. Guess. Some 100? Or maybe some thousands? The figure is 46,600 people are added. I'm not saying are born in India. And again at 2:30, when I started coming here in, today, that is 14th May 2018, 28,580 persons had been added in this day only. Even though globally, today India is the second most populous country in the world, but very soon, even though the demographers, United Nations has given the year 2050, but it may come even before that. It's going to have that dubious distinction of the most populous country in the world. We may not be number one in any other thing. I'm not aware of. You can tell me if we are number one in any other thing, but definitely as far as the question is concerned, who breeds more? Indians comes first therein. There are many aspects to that. Is it an asset? Is it a liability? Of course, it depends the context, the resources in which we have been talking about this. And as far as India's demography is concerned, its base is young. We are having young demographic base. And even though the ultimately growth rate has declined, but the number of persons which are being added every day, what to talk about every year, are on rise for this. And when we are talking about growing population of India, particularly in the context of the right to food, then of course, how much more time is to me? Just tell me. Tell me how much time. Short is not clear to me. No, just tell me, I'll wind up. Okay, just tell me how much more time. Okay, so I have 5 minutes. I will try to wind up. We are very disciplined persons, and that is the first thing which I teach to my students also. So agriculture plays a very important role in India's economy. But when we see how many number of people in India are dependent on the agriculture or the rate of employability, the story comes out like this, that agriculture is becoming less important to economy, while it remains critical to employment. So it is 18% share of agriculture in the GDP in 2012, and employment is 50%. I hope I'm able to convey the message here. And again, Indian future is also intertwined with how much more water we can harness for agriculture and how much better we can utilize it. So many stories are there. There are some countries who, because of the lack of water, has stopped growing rice in their own country, and they are importing it from other countries. Because again, the thing is there that if there is any a third war, it will be on the waters. So scarcity of waters also alarms us, and water is very essential when we are talking about food, the growing up of the food. Now I take you to the shrinking pie. When we are talking about the shrinking pie, this is in two senses. One is the arable land, the population is growing, the forest is curved, buildings are there, we cannot go horizontal, we have to go vertical, and therefore we are having so many mini Singapores here also in India. But the other kind of a thing is there, that as far as cultivation is concerned, there is less land for that also. So pie is in that particular sense also. And pie is another sense, it's not that if we really see our economic growth over the last few years, our pie is getting fatter. Even though pie is getting fatter, but the ultimate share which any one of them gets, the slice which any one of them gets, is becoming thinner. Why? Because even though nationally we can have, recently it is not that growth rate is improving, but whenever it is improving, we may have good growth rate at the national level. But when it comes to individual persons, of course, the picture is very glooming therein. And therefore, I conclude by saying that conclusion is before you, that whatever measures or the right to food I have talked about is concerned, yes, it is good, it should be there, but it is not sufficient. It is a short-term measures to tackle the right to the food. And investment in rural infrastructure is very important, and population demographic projections have to be included to improve agriculture production and achieve greater food security. And therefore, the way forward we can have to that, the way forward is closely related with the conclusions. And I have given the example of one Philippine. In the Philippines, it has happened so. They have related this food scarcity or deaths from scarcity with the empowerment of the women, and particularly from the point of view of the family planning, that they had given the responsibilities to the women. They have given good number of choices of contraceptions to the women, and then they have found good results as far as the scarcity of food is concerned. Scarcity of food, health of the woman, health of the children, they are all interrelated kinds of the things. So what we can say herein is that when we are talking about right to food, it is very, very essential that we have also to take care of for how many people we are planning. And studies are there in India which says that the women are now motivated to have small family, but the government has not been able to provide them the choice of contraceptives and the good quality of contraceptives. So that is one of the things which should be done by the government. So how this family planning, lesser number of children is interrelated with the right to food. In this short presentation, I had tried to connect them. So my view is that right to food or scarcity to the food or insecurity of the food can to a large extent be tackled if we really believe in small families. Small families doesn't mean necessarily any coercive methods by the government for the individual to have small family, but by promoting them to have small families so that their health, maternal health as well as the children's health can also be taken care of. Thank you. Thank you for your patient hearing, and thank you organizers for giving me a little bit extra time.